Hi, creative friends. This is Soraya, and thank you so much for being here. So, today is a perfect day to meet around the virtual fireplace and talk about our favorite Dr. E here, Women Who Run with the Wolves. So, this is going to be an extension of the Bluebeard, the Predator, because I made a video and then I listened to it because I listen to all of my videos before I post them. And I thought, this requires a little more explanation. So basically, in my previous video on Bluebeard, I talked about the internal predator. And in that video, I said that the predator can be anything like resembling an inner critic to an abuser. And that is a wide range. But basically, I'm going to go in depth about what exactly that means. So, like, most things, it's on a continuum. An inner critic can, if you take it to the extreme, become an abuser. And we're talking about this, this all within our psyche. So we're not even looking at the external world right now. We're just looking within ourselves. So just say that we have an inner critic, an inner predator, if you will, according to the Bluebeard um, metaphor. We're talking about Jungian psychology. So these are all aspects of our psyche. So just say that we want to do something. We want to, write a book or go and get our PhD or whatever it might be. And we have an internal critic that starts to really hinder us. Now, I'm not talking about a voice that says, you're really not prepared to write a book right now on this subject. Maybe you should do a little more research. That is not what I would call an inner critic. That is just the voice of logic and reason. Now, if you spend 10 years researching a book, now I would say that that inner critic has now become poisonous and toxic. To the point where it's going to stop you from doing what you want to do. So we have to differentiate between all of these aspects of ourselves that could take the form of a predator. Now, in just say I'm going to talk about me personally because this is how I said I was going to do the series. So basically, I come from a childhood system. My experiences have been one of abuse and just really toxic, poisonous patriarchy. And so, when I was a kid and I was downloaded with all these beliefs and I experienced what I experienced, I had an external predator. And what happened is, as I grew up and as I became an adult and as I left that situation, now I have replicated that external predator into my psyche. So now you don't need the external predator anymore. You already have the internal predator, the internal abuser. So because I have this internal abuser, this internal Bluebeard, to use the analogy from my previous video, I and because I have this aspect of my psyche that is in the shadow self, I have not come face to face with it. I have not become friends with it. I have not confronted it. I have not brought that shadow out into the open. It is there lurking in the shadows in my subconscious, unconscious mind. So, what's going to happen now is I am going to go out into the world. I have this internal abuser, predator within my own psyche, and I am going to meet people who, some of them might be abusive. And because I have this internal abuser inside of myself that I have not brought out into the light, I am now going to give space to the external abusers into my life. And these can take the forms of friendships or work situations or a partner, an intimate relationship, say family situations, because I have this internal abuser inside of myself. I am going to now have emotional resonance with an external abuser. But if I am aware of this internal abuser within my own psyche, and what will happen is I am still going to meet external predators, bluebeards, abusers. But now I am not going to have any emotional resonance with these people. I might meet them once or twice or maybe even three times, but I am going to now recognize the red flags. I am going to listen to my intuition. I am going to learn how to set my boundaries. I am going to say, hey, you know what? This isn't going to work for me. And that's that. You're not going to give these people or these situations that are abusive, you're not going to give them space in your life, because you have now accepted that abuser part of yourself. You have brought that abuser into the light, and you realize that that abuser that was living in the shadows has so much to teach you. It has tons of information, that knowledge that it can impart on you. You're going to I shouldn't say you. I'm going to look at that inner abuser, and I'm going to try to figure out, okay, where did this inner abuser come from? What were these belief systems that um that allowed this inner abuser to not only live, but to grow and to thrive and to take control over huge parts of my life? This, when you bring your shadow aspects to the light, they have so much to teach us. And the initial fear of meeting our shadow, at least it was for me, is there is this terror of meeting your shadow, because you're like, oh my God, like if I had to meet my shadow, it's so ugly, it's so repulsive, it's like the boogeyman under the bed. But once you become friends with your shadow, it has so much to teach you. And now what you've done is you have taken your power back. You have pulled all of those aspects that are living in your subconscious mind. You have now just pulled them all back. You become friends with your shadow. You say, hey, shadow, what do you have to teach me? You can journal, you can do mirror work, you can talk to a therapist about it, you can talk to a trusted loved one about it. There's so many ways that we can confront our shadow selves. But the most important thing to realize is that we spend so much of our lives, and I am like the first person to admit this, because I didn't want to look at my shadow, because it was so scary for me to think about what these shadow aspects of myself are. But these shadow aspects, not only do they have things to teach us, but they will empower us. Because now, when we can become best friends with our shadow selves, we can bring it into the light, we can look at those wounds, we can heal those wounds by going back, tracing it back, and seeing how these wounds were formed, seeing how these belief systems were formed, examining our unconscious agreements. And I am going to make a video about unconscious agreements. I probably need to make a couple of videos about that. But we can look at how these aspects of ourselves were formed. And now, when we go out into the world, sure, we're still going to meet predators. We're still going to find ourselves in situations that are not for our highest good, that are going to be like a Bluebeard situation. But now we are armed with knowledge, with empowerment. We are armed with our intuition, our boundaries, our listening skills, our rewired belief systems. So I'll give you an example that is a very common one, and that is the fear of aging, okay, and how that can become a predator within ourselves. So just say that we grew up in an environment where we were abused, neglected. We were taught that, we have no needs. Children should be seen and not heard. All of these things are abusive. And, they might seem normal just because 50 years ago, I mean, that was normal child rearing practices. But a lot of what was considered normal back then is truly abusive. And it doesn't have to be a situation like I experienced, which really was extremely abusive in every sense of the word. Um, these patterns of abuse can be more subtle and more difficult to kind of look at and recognize. But just say we were installed with all of these belief systems within us. So we have this internal predator. And like I said, an inner critic can become a predator, it can become abusive. So it's all on a continuum. So just say that, we are socialized by not only our families, but our society and by our cultural institutions, by advertising, et cetera, et cetera. And there is a $1 billion industry on, you know, uh, telling women that we are not good enough. And nowhere is this more apparent than the aging slash dieting slash cosmetic industry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have this internal predator that we have not looked at. It lives in our unconscious, it lives in our shadow, and we have not brought it to light. So we are going along in our lives and, we start aging. It is a natural process. But because we have this internal shadow aspect that is living in our psyche that we have not addressed, it might be an inner critic, or it might be more on the abusive side. It might be on this side of the continuum. So, we're 40, 50, 60, 70, whatever it is. And now all of those messages that, you can't open a magazine, you can't turn on the TV, you pretty much can't do anything without there being so many messages targeted at women by and large, about how we shouldn't be aging, how we should be doing everything we can to, I don't know, not age, or pretend that we're not aging, or, disguise our aging, et cetera, et cetera. And that takes an enormous amount of energy. It takes a lot of life force. It takes a lot of creative life force. It takes a lot of our mental energy, our emotional energy. It just takes, it saps us. Okay. And, so just say I am, whatever age I am, and everywhere I look, I am getting these messages that, I am not valuable anymore. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of, just my dignity, being a human being, basically. There's so much embarrassment that is tied into aging, which is really strange because, it's such a natural part of life, and the only alternative is death. Um, you know um Anyways, so just say I go along and I am now becoming more and more consumed about aging. And I'm not talking about, just taking care of ourselves, which is just, making healthier lifestyle choices with what we eat and exercising and all of those things. I'm not talking about that, or even, wearing makeup, or, I don't know, there's a myriad of things that we do on an everyday basis. So I'm not criticizing any of those things. And none of those things in and of themselves are, bad or negative or abusive. In even, plastic surgery. If somebody wants to have plastic surgery, okay, fine. But there comes a point when we have to ask ourselves, um, what exactly are we trying to do? Because I'm sure we've all seen those articles, or TV shows or whatever, about a person, usually a woman, who keeps on getting plastic surgery after plastic surgery after plastic surgery. It's not enough to get, this and that and this and that, but it's like, oh well, it's just never ending. It's like, well, I need 100 plastic surgeries, and after I get my 100 plastic surgeries, I need 101. And that is going to now become an internal predator. So the way I would approach that is to look at that shadow self and to bring it out into the light, and to see, where did these beliefs, where did they come from? And I would ask myself, does this serve me? I have been wanting to let my hair go gray for, I don't know, a long time. And in the past couple of years, I just decided, I'm going to let my hair go gray. And I wish I would have done it sooner. And there's nothing wrong with coloring my hair, I just got to the point where I was like, you know what? My hair is going gray so fast. Like I would have had to color my hair like, every, I don't know, couple of weeks. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be bothered with it. Um, I still take care of myself. I look after my health, but I am 56 years old and I'm okay with being 56 years old. I'm actually really grateful to be 56 years old. But I think a large part of that, acceptance of my aging process has been because I am doing shadow work and I haven't allowed that shadow to become a predator in my life. Now, there have been times, and actually most of my life, when I didn't look at my shadow and I did allow the internal predator, the internal shadow aspect of the abuser to become a huge part of my life. And this part of my psyche was making decisions for me. It was allowing people into my lives that were not good for me, that were abusive, quite frankly, whether it was friendships or family members or intimate partners or whatever it was, because I had the emotional resonance because I did not look at my shadow aspects. And I remember when I was in my teens, in my 20s, even for a large part of my 30s, I actually was so unaligned with who I was. I mean, everything was all over the place. Like my belief systems were here, my heart, my emotions were over here, my gut was over here, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, I just had no alignment. So I was constantly looking outside of myself for, you know, for am I okay? I was constantly looking outside of myself for love, for worth, for acceptance, for validation. So that internal predator became such a huge part of my psyche and it took control over my psyche and it started making decisions in my life because I was operating from my shadow self. And like I said, the inner predator can take the form of a critic all the way to an abuser. And I do believe those things are on a continuum. And I just used aging as an example, but there are tons of examples. There are tons of examples when we allow the internal predator in our lives to totally like run roughshod over our entire lives. It is basically driving the car. And it reminds me of Elizabeth Gilbert when she gave her, I think it was her now famous TED talk, or it might have been in her book Big Magic. I don't remember. I've read a lot of her stuff and listened to a lot of her videos, but she was talking about fear. And I use the same analogy because it applies so well with our shadow selves. She said that I'm not going to let fear drive the car, but I am going to invite it to sit in the front seat. I am going to become friends with it. I am going to acknowledge its presence. I am going to say, hey, what do you have to teach me? What do you have to show me? And it's the same thing with our shadows. You know, if we allow it to come to the light, if we are courageous enough to act on our curiosity in the Bluebeard story, and to act on our curiosity and to use that little key, which is knowledge, which represents knowledge, if we allow it to open the cellar door and look at those dead bodies, now we're dealing with the reality of the situation. Now we know where we stand. We know what's going on. We're not living a lie, because living a lie requires so much energy. And the worst lies are the ones that we tell ourselves. Can you imagine how much energy and creativity and life force it takes to uphold denial? The lies that we tell ourselves and the lies that we tell other people are secondary. Those require a lot of energy too. But the lies that we tell ourselves, that requires an enormous amount of energy. So if we are bold enough, courageous enough, we can open that door. We can look at our shadow selves, and we can now operate from a space of truth, from a space of clarity and courage. And we can become friends with our shadow because they have so much to teach us. And now we can heal those aspects of our psyche. And it is difficult work. It is not for the faint of heart. But if we can do this work, now we can go forward in our journey, and we can be armed with things like discernment, with things like boundaries, with things like listening, listening to ourselves, listening to other people, listening to, the red flags, um, listening to our intuition. Um, we can become who we are in this world. We can show up as we are, and that is the gold. That is the pot of gold at the end of all of this. And not just at the end of it, but on the way there, because each little bit, each little tiny step that we take towards healing and looking at our shadow selves, we get a little bit of the gold. We don't get this whole big pot of gold at the end of it. We get a little bit of that gold. We become more and more and more of ourselves. And isn't that the greatest gift of all, to be able to be comfortable in our own skins? We are not masking and pretending to be something that we're not. We're not trying to bend ourselves into a pretzel to fit into somebody else's version of who we need to be, of who we should be, of, well, I have to be this in order to be loved, accepted, validated, etc., etc. We turn all of that into ourselves, and now we're like, you know what? I am going to give these things to myself. I am going to show up in the world as I am. And now, when you are able to do this, you are going to attract your tribe, because when you are not showing up in the world as you are attracting all the wrong people. And it took me so long to figure this out. But I see this now with the social media accounts that I'm attracted to, whether it's YouTube videos or Instagram or even books. I am attracted to authenticity. I am attracted to people who show up in the world as they are. And it doesn't matter what they're doing. They could be a potter or a baker. They could be, it doesn't even matter. It's just the fact that they are showing up in this world authentically to who they are, the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm not saying they're putting everything out there. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, when they do show up, and it's a feeling you get. It's not something you can really explain. You just know when somebody is showing up authentically as who they are in the world. And when I was in my 20s, and my uh, even in my 30s, I would not be attracted to these people because I was not being authentically who I am. So when I saw somebody who was being authentic, it terrified me. It repulsed me. It sent me running for the hills, and I had no resonance. There was no magnetic pull to somebody who was being authentic, because I was not being authentic. But the more I become who I am attracted to people who themselves are being authentic. And in this way, we can attract, and we can be attracted to the people who belong to our tribe, who resonate with us, and we resonate with them. Because when we're not being ourselves, we are attracting all of the wrong people. And those people, this is not to be in a space of judgment, because those people are our greatest teachers. Those people are going to show us our wounds. They are going to lead us back to ourselves. They are going to show us how we got so off the path. And those people are now going to say, in all the lessons that we learn, which are oftentimes painful, we are now going to say, oh, wow, I really got off my path there. Thank you. And then you let those people go with love in your heart, with gratitude, with non-judgment, and we go on our way. Anyways, I hope that I have not been rambling on too much. I hope that this has illustrated how we can have this internal predator, and it can be on a continuum from an inner critic to an abuser, and how by looking at our shadow aspects, we can now become more healed, more empowered, and more of who we are. And that, my friends, that is that's the that's the journey. That's the gold. That's what we're all after. Well, not all of us. Some of us are not interested in this journey, and that's okay too, because it was a large part of my life when I wasn't interested in this journey. So, anyways, thank you so much for giving me space. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.